Hey, it's Cat Lover. Let's get right into it. In the early 2000s, Sega was at a loss on what to do with their bread and butter Sonic. The Dreamcast was a bit of a flop, they stopped making consoles, and now they needed something. A console that wasn't a flop to put a Sonic game on. So, Sega decided to put Sonic on a Nintendo console, the Game Boy Advance to be exact. They somewhat took Sonic back to his roots, creating a trilogy of 2D games on the Game Boy Advance going by the name of Sonic Advance. Today, I'll be talking about the first and honestly roughest game in the lineup, Sonic Advance 1. This game is not bad, far from it actually, but lacks a lot of the things that the other games in the trilogy don't. Let it be known that this is the first Sonic Advance game I ever played, and I found it to be pretty good actually. Gotta make that clear before I tear some things apart. There are just certain things about it that make it feel kind of frustrating to play. Even so, I was willing to replay it for this video because I was still so excited to talk about it. I had a lot of fun playing it at first, but flaws do rear its ugly head sometimes. I won't sugarcoat anything, so just remember that I still think it's a good 2D Sonic game. Without further ado, let's get into it. Since the Sonic Advance trilogy are all 2D games, movement in the games are much like how they are in any 2D Sonic game. All the characters move more or less the same as Sonic does, but with some of the abilities seen in the classic games. The gameplay in terms of mechanics are good enough, and I really don't have much to complain about. I will, however, talk about the physics of the game and how it feels to play. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but the movement in Sonic Advance feels kinda weird. Unlike the others, this game feels a bit odd to play due to how the characters move. Movement feels a lot slower than it needs to, and considering that this is a Sonic game, the player is expecting the game to go by smoothly and quickly. That isn't the case here, as building momentum can only really be done with a spin dash, air dash, or any other move, and this can be a grave mistake depending on the levels you're playing because Dibs loves their bottomless pits. Yeah, movement here is not too great, and I feel like a damn snail trying to traverse further into the level when I just want to go fast without having to turn into a gymnast. Turns out this is your first taste of how much the game hates you sometimes, but it's too early for that. The physics in regards to falling also feels off, as it's honestly unlike anything I've seen in a Sonic game. In other 2D Sonic games, you usually fall pretty fast after jumping, but in Sonic Advance 1, it feels like you're kind of floating, and not in a good way. It can make precise jumps very difficult sometimes. I understand it's a whole new series, but the overall movement of the game can feel so awkward and weird. The game also has issues with the flow of gameplay, as you could just be building up speed and be smacked in the face by an item box or a spring. It stops you dead in your tracks, and with how slow moving you are, it can get pretty annoying. It doesn't feel as natural or as quick as it should, just a giant halting gameplay. Even so, the gameplay is still miles better than a lot of Sonic games. The controls are very straightforward, no matter what character you're playing. Speaking of which, I like the addition of multiple characters being playable. It really helps spice up gameplay and make the overall experience a lot more unique. Knuckles punches and glides, Tails flies, Sonic plays as expected, and Amy can't spin dash or go into a ball, but she can use her hammer to attack, which is pretty cool. I personally like the abilities the characters have as it adds a lot of personality, though some are better to play than others. Moving on, there are special stages in Advance, just like in basically any Sonic game. Finding the entrance to them isn't too hard, as you just need to search around the levels to find a giant spring. The special stages themselves are pretty weird, in both a good and possibly bad way. I like how almost each Sonic game provides new types of special stages, and this game is no exception. Riding through a bottomless hole on a board is really cool, but controlling the board is a bit wonky. It can also be kinda hard to see in front of you, so expecting the unexpected is pretty important. Even so, I actually kinda like these stages, though they could be a little more bearable and have more entrances to them throughout the levels. Overall, the gameplay in Advance 1 is good and fun, but needs a few tweaks to make it feel better. So, let's talk about the level design now. Oh god, I don't even know where to start with this section. Alright, so I can safely say that not all the levels' designs suck. There are even levels I really enjoy, such as Secret Base and Ice Mountain Zone. The colors in all the levels look really beautiful. They mesh well with the Sonic universe, and I'll just say that it looks really good to have been released in 2001 on a handheld device. One thing I love about the older Sonic games is that the levels always look so vibrant and full of life. The pixels look clean, and for it being the first game of the trilogy, it still looks quite good. Let me just say right now that no matter how much fun I had with the first couple of levels, no matter how happy and full of joy I felt, it all disappeared almost as soon as I hit Angel Island. Angel Island is a neat concept. It's a bit weird in terms of lore, but I like this addition in the game. Or I would have if it didn't hate my guts for whatever reason. This is the point in the game where it really starts to test your patience, especially if you're like me and didn't know what a backwards jump or air dash was. I played this game for the first time last year, so I wasn't too familiar with anything it had to offer, unfortunately. I wasn't prepared for it upon replaying it, and I don't remember the level design being so punishing. Angel Island, as it takes place in the air, has a ton of bottomless pits, and I could excuse this because, you know, you're higher than a stressed college student, but the level design is oppressive. There is no going fast here unless you memorize the level layout, as you get dropped off the map faster than you can blink, and being precise in your jumps is key. I already said the movement felt a little weird, so getting to this level and having to be accurate or die is pretty frustrating, but I was a lot more comfortable going back and replaying this level again. Sometimes it just feels like you're being punished simply for wanting to have fun. Also, silly me, I totally forgot I was playing on an emulator, so I wasted all my lives only to realize I could save and load at any point in time, but I wanted the original experience. Unfortunately. It's cool to punish a player for playing recklessly, but I felt like I was doing everything right and would still get killed for no reason. If you don't react quick enough, there's no saving yourself from a bottomless pit. Having to walk on eggshells was my biggest gripe about the game. Then you get to Egg Rocket, where at first it isn't too terrible and it's actually kind of fun. Then you start running into pit after pit after pit, and it's not very easy to react to them. There are also moments where you may not get dropped into a bottomless pit, but you can be dropped from a higher point in a level and have to trudge your way back up. It happens commonly and constantly if you're clumsy like I am. The previous levels are great, and even Cosmic Angel isn't half bad, but these two levels kind of soured the game for me. After being angry, I just felt kind of let down and sad because the other levels were really good, and I hated to see them get brought down by just 2 bad levels. Of course, I can recognize that some things were a skill issue on my part, but I still think the level design could have been 10 times less annoying. The level design could have been better, but it's still pretty fun. So let's get into the bosses. Like I've said before, most if not all 2D Sonic games have some issues with their bosses. This game is no different, but I can't say that the bosses really frustrated me or anything. They were just really lackluster for whatever reason. Kind of feels like you're expected to get on a bunch of cool rides at an amusement park, only to not reach the height requirement and be forced on a teacup ride. With the weird movement, the bosses feel even more odd to play. Some bosses are absolutely pitiful, while some are actually great concepts and fun to play through. With how slow you feel, it might be harder to grab rings after being hit, and you might die to the easiest bosses ever because you have no rings. Even the final boss is a little lacking in the difficulty department, but the vibes and visuals are a match solid as slide. The bosses are either hit or miss, but I can't say that any of them are bad, except for you. I don't know exactly what I was looking for in the bosses considering it's a 2D Sonic game, but since the quality of them are inconsistent, I can't say they're bad. Even when boring, they're still kinda creative and probably just reflect the time the game was being developed. In general, I don't have a problem with the bosses, but they could have been better. Now, let's wrap it up. The game isn't half bad, and I found myself having a lot of fun with it despite how weird it felt to play. The bosses weren't bad to play, maybe you felt a bit awkward, but weren't awful concepts. The levels were all creative, and even if I hated some of them, I could still find some fun in them, no matter how small. There are some inexcusable things about the game though, ranging from the movements, physics, and level design. I'm a pretty critical and easily frustrated person, so I tried giving the game a fair shot, and I did. It really did feel awful to play sometimes, but it was worth the experience. Even with how much I sound like I might hate the game, I don't. I really like the game, I just wish I had enjoyed it more. Overall, the game is far from bad, and was a good start for the Advanced Trilogy. So, sorry if I sounded way more critical than usual. Or as critical as usual, I'm a negative Nancy a lot of the time. Sonic Advance 1 was the first, and the first in the trilogy usually isn't the most highly acclaimed. Even then, I wish I could have had more fun with the game than I did, because I was having fun, at first. I wouldn't ever say it's bad though, since I still think it's pretty good, and I'm glad I have a more transparent opinion of it now. It's a good beginning for the Advanced Trilogy, though other games improve on things a bit more. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Cat Lover, it's been real. Peace!